It was one of the first questions people asked after the shooting in Las Vegas. What kind of weapons did the gunman use to kill and wound so many people? We've since learned that Stephen Paddock had 23 firearms in his hotel room, another 19 at home, all bought legally. And although fully automatic guns are not legal, he also had 2 bump stock devices, the sole function of which is to convert semi-automatic rifles into fully automatic rifles. The result in this case, as you know, the deaths of at least 59 people, more than 500 others injured. Nevada also has some of the most lenient gun laws in the country. They do not license gun owners or require guns to be registered. They do not limit the number of guns a person can buy in a single sale. There are no waiting periods to buy guns. And high-capacity magazines, high-caliber weapons and ammunition, and military-style weapons are all allowed to be sold. It's a very different situation than here in Massachusetts. My next guest would like it to stay that way. Attorney General Maura Healey joins me. Attorney General, it's good to see you.
Good to be with you.
I know you said at a speech this morning you want to see more federal gun control. With all due respect, it's not happening. But what may happen is a bill is circulating that would say a reciprocal concealed carry bill that says if you're from Arizona and you're allowed to conceal carry and you come to your state of Massachusetts, you'd be perfectly within the law to have a concealed carry here. Is there anything you could do about that? Should Congress pass it and Donald Trump sign it?
Well, certainly, because this is about a direct affront, the undermining of our own state laws here. You're talking about reciprocity for concealed carry. Don't be ridiculous. They also want to do silencers. They want to bring silencers back. And, you know, we've got a couple things that we've got to do, Jim. We've got to make sure that those pieces of legislation find the dustbin. Now is not the time in our country. We need Americans all over this country, though, to pick up the phone and call members of Congress. You say it's not possible? I challenge that. There has to be a way forward because the vast majority of Americans, Democrat and Republican, overwhelmingly support common sense reforms. And look, in Massachusetts, we understand this. We have strong gun laws. As a result, we have very low numbers in terms of gun deaths. That's the equation. And we've also, in Massachusetts, been able to ensure that people have the ability to buy and purchase guns. We respect the Second Amendment, so we know this can work. And let this be a time where there's action. That's what the American people need. Speaking of action, and majority of Americans, Richard Smith, who people probably never heard of before a couple of weeks ago, the head of Equifax, testified in front of Congress today. Here's a little piece of what he had to say.
The criminal hack happened on my watch. And as CEO, I am ultimately responsible. And I take full responsibility.
I have to say, I have no idea what he's talking about. In my opinion, as a layperson, he's taken no responsibility. Your office is suing Equifax. You filed legislation. Give us the short version of what both things are intended to do.
Well, major breach, worst we've seen in history. As a result, millions of Americans' personal data is out there vulnerable to exploitation. So 2 things. We sued because Equifax needs to be held accountable. They need to pay for customers' relief, which means that they need to foot the bill for any efforts that need to be taken to protect people against identity theft. They need to reform the system. And they also need to pay a big penalty because for far too long, these credit reporting agencies have played fast and loose with our data. They're happy to collect it, but they're not willing to safeguard it. The other thing is legislation, Jim. And the reason I supported it and worked on this legislation that was filed last week is because we need reforms to the system. I'll tell you what I mean. People should be able to get credit freezes for free whenever they want. They should be able to have access to their credit reports for free. If the banks have our info, we should have access to it too. And anytime these companies want to sell or others want to purchase our personal data, you know what? They should get our permission first. Those are some basics.
Let me just ask you about 2 things that I hope are either in there or could be added there. One, we learned that in most of Western Europe, you have companies like Equifax have an obligation to notify the breachee, the hackee, that their data has been hacked within 72 hours. It was 6 weeks here while they're getting their act together, such as it is. Is that something that you'd propose changing or no?
That is already the law here. And what is
galling, is the law here.
It is the law here. And what is galling is that we now know that there may have been earlier breaches which weren't disclosed as well.
So they broke state law.
Hey, I think Equifax broke a lot of laws here. We've outlined that in our complaint. But, you know, I think that this really points up, not only are there problems with Equifax, but we need to reform the system to make it right, to work for consumers.
One more thing about this that drives me nuts. This guy is leaving with a $90 million, you can call it wet kiss, parachute, whatever it is. We learned that companies like Wells Fargo have these clawback provisions so that after, if you'll excuse the expression, they screwed their customers, tens of millions of the money of those who were responsible for it was drawn. Those kinds of rules within Equifax are not as strong. Why can't we have a state law that says if you want to do business here, under certain conditions, the stockholders, the public, the Attorney General has the ability to claw back some of your tens of millions of ill-gotten gains, like in my estimation this guy has gone home with? Yes,
I think we already have that.
We
and
do?
In fact, in my lawsuit, I've asked for that. I've asked that Equifax disgorge the profits that have been made because at the end of the day, this is a $3 billion industry.
Including the CEO himself?
Including executives in the company. I mean, we're talking about, again, this is a system that has been set up to facilitate credit. Important. We need to have that for working markets. But they've only monetized it and not paid any bit of attention to the safeguards that need to be in place. The other thing that I want people to know is that for those of you who felt frustrated having to go to multiple locations to ask for credit freezes, there should be a single portal. That's what this legislation does. One-stop shopping for credit freeze requests.
Amen, Attorney General. I want to talk to you about another case that was argued before the SJC. I've heard you say on many occasions you believe addiction is a public health issue. Mm-hmm. It's a disease. But you are opposing a petition of a litigant at the state's highest court who is saying that requiring her to be sober is unconstitutional because it is a disease. Here's what your brief says in part. Most people with a drug addiction retain the ability to exercise choice. Which side are you on? Do you think it's a disease, in which case there's no choice? Do you think they have a choice? Where are you on this thing?
Addiction is a disease. And sadly, I think having spent a lot of time with families, having known people directly afflicted by this, it is a disease.
So why are you opposing this
that's part what that case really is about is a constitutional question about whether you can order as a condition of probation compliance with substance use programming. You know, I think
they should be able to do that.
I think that there's a value to that. I think that that's an appropriate term of probation. But what this really speaks to, and I think the question you're rightly posing is, what are we doing to ensure that these people who are afflicted with a disease have access to treatment?
What are we doing?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I am fighting real hard to make sure that there's no repeal of the ACA. Why? Because so many people are able to access substance use treatment and care as a result of expanded Medicaid options and the ACA. We're working directly with insurers here in Massachusetts and providers to better facilitate people's ability to access treatment and care. We need money, we need resources, and I'll continue to work to advocate for that while taking on some of these opioid manufacturers and distributors. I announced a couple of weeks ago that we've expanded that investigation because remember, so much of what led to this crisis across the country was caused by the proliferation of opioid prescription pills.
We're running short on time. Are you involved, from what I understand, the Globe did this incredibly painful series about these patient brokers, for lack of a better expression, that essentially, mostly former drug users, lure in current drug users, promise to send them to a treatment center, Florida, places like that, to get treatment. A couple of them have died, and the whole thing is about essentially scamming the insurance companies. Are you involved in this, or are you not?
We are. We're investigating reports that we've received of people who are looking to profit off of people who are incredibly vulnerable. And so based on actual reports that I heard from families, we've announced investigations into treatment centers where people basically were sent but weren't given treatment. We need to support good treatment options, but absolutely shut down the bad apples who are out there looking to take advantage of people who are sick.
You'll be very happy to hear we only have 30 seconds for my final question, which is every poll I've seen shows you to be the most formidable opponent of the sitting governor. Why are you not running for? I know you love your job. I know you love being Attorney General, but your predecessor loved her job, and she ultimately decided, I want to have the highest office. Why are you not running for governor?
I think I've got a great job, you know, and I think right now,
You're about
Jim,
to say the best job, but you didn't say it.
It is the best job. I'll tell you why, because every day my job is to run a law firm that's there to fight for people. We've intervened to defend access to health care. We've sued to make sure that we're protecting our clean energy investments and prerogative here. We get to take actions on behalf of students and consumers and workers and seniors and children, and it doesn't get any better than that. It's a great privilege for me to be able to serve, and I think right now in these challenging times, I'm glad we have recourse to to the courts. And I'm working closely with other attorneys generals from around the country. I'm also working bipartisan. I reached out last night to Adam Laxalt in Nevada and offered assistance. He's a Republican, but in this time right now, I know he needs help with victim witness assistance. I know the lessons from the Marathon bombing can help them. And so that's what this is about, helping people.
Good to see you, Maura Healey.
Great to be with you, Jim.
Thanks so much for your time, as always.